Hello, guys, welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and this message it comes from a translation of a message that I received. The message reads like this: Hello, my brother, how are you? I want to tell you my own story, but I have a lot of stories that I would want to share with you, but I will try to just make them brief. The first story that I want to tell you about, it is all about one of my auntie's daughter. That girl, she was really beautiful. So me, my parents, we both were in the village. Then the rest of my father's brothers and his sisters, they had all moved into the city. So since my father, he was the youngest amongst all of his siblings in our culture, what we do is that when a child is the youngest, he is the one who is supposed to stay in the village, so that the house that would have been built by their parents, the house will always have someone that will be staying in it. So when my father's brothers and the sisters had gone to stay and to work in the city, my father then remained behind with our grandparents. After the death of our grandparents, then people in the family, like my aunties and my uncles, they had all started praying when they had arrived in the city. So they stopped like worshiping the ancestors and doing stuff like that. So the only person who was doing this, it was my father as well as my mother. From her own family side, they were heavily involved in ancestral worship. So when my uncles and my aunties came to burn some of the stuff that had been used by our grandparents for ancestor worship, then my father refused. From there on, I can say that there was a breakdown of relationship between my father and his brothers and his sisters as well. So we grew up as if we didn't have any relatives at all. Even if someone will die, people would never call my father, because they said that my father, since he was doing all of these things, he used to bewitch a lot of people. But my father only started doing some evil stuff after they had started accusing him of doing things that he didn't even know about. So we then started to see this other animal. This animal, we used to see it somewhere around 4 p.m., just before sunset. This animal, it used to climb down the mountain. Then you would hear my father saying that the creature has arrived, the creature that wants to destroy my home, it has arrived. Meaning that in my father's family, there was someone who wanted my father to die, because after we had seen that animal for a couple of months as it was climbing down the mountain, that was when my father got so ill. And we then called this other traditional healer, and that healer even told my mother that if you had not called me earlier, this man, he was going to get buried, because I can see that they were trying to steal his spirit. And it seemed as if people were fighting for our great grandfather's spear, because it is still even there. So this spear, what they used to say about it is that it can give you great wealth, because our grandfather, he was a great hunter. So now they wanted to sort out that spear, like instead of the spear being taken into the forest to hunt for wild animal, this spear will be taken by whoever into the city, so that you can hunt for great wealth in terms of money. So they were always fighting against my father, since he was the one who had this spear. Even though they were claiming to be now Christians, but they used to visit some traditional healers late at night when no one could see them. Our father once went to this other traditional healer who was using a mirror. That traditional healer confirmed it to my father that his own brothers and relatives, they were going around at night so that they can try to destroy his life, so that they can retrieve this spear from him. My father was then told by that traditional healer that he had to dig some items like some charms into the compound, and this were going to serve as sort of like a protection. And there will be always a spirit that will be protecting his household from lightning, like lightning striking down the houses. Because back in those days, a lot of people in our village, They used to suffer from lightning strikes, but whenever someone's house would be struck by lightning, it was not like maybe it was the lightning of God, but it was man made. It was more like someone was just creating all of this lightning so that they can just strike people's homes. My father was then given this either idol. It was a wooden statue of a monkey. So we then dug up in a spot where he had selected. We did this, it was somewhere around 9 p.m. My father was the one who was standing in front, then me and my siblings, we were standing behind our mother. After my father had dug up that hole whilst we were standing in a single file, that was when he said that we had to circle that hole that he had dug, and we all knelt down and we helped him to place that idol, and we helped him to place that idol inside that hole that he had dug up. Even though this statue, it was not even heavy, even a baby could lift up that statue, but this was a ritual that we were supposed to perform. So after my father had performed all of those rituals, the rules were that we were not supposed to get out of the house with fire like we used to cook in a mud hut. So we were not allowed, since we didn't have electricity in the village. So you would go into the kitchen, then you will light up your paraffin lamp, those ones that we used to use in the village. So our father then told us that under no circumstances should we ever try to do it when it was night time, like getting out of your room, going into the kitchen and lighting your candle or the lamp that we were using, the paraffin lamp, then walking outside with it. It was really forbidden. And since we were kids, my brother, some of the things that our parents told us not to do, we'll end up doing it anyway. It then happened that my father and my mother, they had traveled. They wanted to go to this other farm where they had heard that there was milli meal there that was quite cheap, and this was during those years when the economy was now really getting difficult. So people used to go around the farms trying to find food that was much cheaper. So it was only me who was the eldest, and some of my siblings, we were really scared, my brother, because as kids, kids are always afraid of the dark. After we had done cooking, that was when my little brother, I had instructed him to go and light up that paraffin lamp just before the sunset. So he had forgotten. By the time that we wanted to lock up the kitchen so that we can go to sleep, he then said that he was scared because in that room there was no light. I said, but I told you to go there so that you can light that lamp before we can come into that room, and we would find out that there is light already, since our parents had told us that we were not supposed to get out of the kitchen holding a fire or holding a candle that was burning or that paraffin lamp. Anyway, as a kid, he just started laughing. I then said, okay, fine, let us go and get that paraffin lamp, but please don't tell our parents that this is what we did, because I didn't know what was going to happen. We then went into that spare bedroom that we used to sleep in as kids. We then returned back to the kitchen and we then lit up that paraffin lamp. My brother, when we were walking back to our spare bedroom, I swear to you that I saw someone. This man that I saw, he seemed to be more like an angelic being, but he was quite tall, very tall. And unlike some drawings that I have seen, like whereby they have beautiful wings, this thing that I saw, it was really scary to look at. You could never look at that scary being twice, and it was very tall. I could not even see his face because its shoulders, it was like the shoulders was even touching the skies. I got so scared and I threw the paraffin lamp on the ground. Then we ran back into the kitchen since we were almost halfway. So I knew that since I had thrown down the paraffin lamp on the ground, the place where we were headed to, There was no torch, there was nothing. It was just darkness in that room. I then screamed at my siblings to follow me. They followed me as we were running back into the kitchen. Then that paraffin lamp, it ended up exploding as if it was a sort of like a bomb that had just exploded. That fire went into the skies, and the whole compound was like very bright, as if this was during the afternoon. It stayed bright like that for a few seconds. Then that brightness, when it was in the sky, it exploded again, and that fire was all over our compound. Then everything just went quiet. The next day, when we woke up, my brother, we saw that all over the compound there were a lot of trenches, as if there was someone who had been digging around our compound. That very same morning, our mom and my dad, they returned back home, and they started insulting us. They were so angry because they said that they knew what had happened. We had gone out of the kitchen holding a paraffin lamp that was burning. How they had managed to know, I never understood at that time. But now that I am much older, I can understand that their tokology was the one that ended up showing them everything that had happened. So my father then quickly ran. I had never seen my father running like that, as he was going to the next village to call his other friend who was also into these things of visiting a lot of traditional healers. When they came back with that man, it was now the three of them, and then we were told that we had to cleanse all of those houses. What they did is that one of the men, he seemed like he was a prophet, like a white garment prophet. This was like the first time for me being close to a white garment prophet. What that man did is that he instructed my mother to go into the kitchen whilst they were sitting outside. Then my mother was told to go and fetch some mealie meal in a bucket as much as she could. Then those men started assisting my father as he was going in each and every room, in each and every room that he was getting into. Then they would be sprinkling that mealie meal that was inside that bucket. When they went into my father's bedroom, I heard a scream. I don't know if this creature that I heard, if it is a normal animal, but the screaming sound that I heard, let's say if there is a car that is traveling at a high speed, the moment that the driver will just hit on the brakes very quickly, there is that sound that comes out when the tires are stopping. That is the sound that I heard that was coming out of my parents' bedroom. Then that prophet came out. He was holding a bag, and inside that bag, I could see that there was something that was moving, which means that they had managed to catch that tokology. They all climbed the mountain. It was my father, my mother, and those guys that were assisting my father. But they came back climbing down the mountain as if they were being chased by something that was really scary. Those men, they ended up staying at our house for how long I do not even remember. Then one night, it was raining on that day. We were then called because we were already fast asleep, me and my siblings, after we were called by my mother. My mom then told us that we had to follow her, but I saw that when we opened the door for her, my mom, she was just naked like that. I really got scared, thinking that maybe my mom was losing her mind. She then instructed us just to cover our breasts, but as for our private parts, she said that we were not supposed to cover our private parts with anything. So we started walking whilst we were following our father. He was also naked. Those men that had came to assist him, they were the only ones that were wearing some plastics because they didn't want to get wet since it was raining on that day. We then arrived at the place where my father's relatives were buried, as well as my grandparents and our great grandparents. They are all buried in that same place. When we arrived at the graveyard, it was really muddy. We looked for the grave that belonged to our grandmother. When my father arrived at the place where our grandmother was buried, he then started speaking with his mother, and he was saying that since she was the one who gave birth to him, he was now asking for help. So he wanted to throw away some of the charms, but he didn't know where to throw away these charms. That was when they dedicated the name of that child who was our auntie's child, the one that was very beautiful. At that time, when they dedicated her name, she was quite young, but she was at the age whereby she was starting to date a lot of men. They called out her name. This was my father and my mother. And mind you, my brother, when I said that they called her, I am talking about a woman who was in the city, yet we were in the villages. After they had called out her name, she then appeared. But the way that she appeared, it was not like a real body. I saw that I could actually see through her because her body was more like smoke. That is the way that she appeared, whilst she was standing right next to the grave of one of our auntie. It seemed as if our auntie was trying to fight for her in spirit, but she was just powerless because one of those prophets then took a knife, but it was not an original knife, it was just a wooden knife, and he went and he placed it on top of our late auntie's grave. Then everything just went quiet. That was when that spirit that we were seeing, the spirit of our auntie's child, just collapsed to the ground. Then my father went to where that spirit was, and he started to act as if he was sleeping with air, because the spirit was just there, whilst he was acting as if he was sleeping with that spirit. After that ritual was done, we then returned back home, and my brother, there was peace at our homestead. It then happened that our auntie's child, she was supposed to get married, and I remember that she was supposed to get married in July. So a few months before she could get married, she then lost her mind. Even right now, our auntie's child, no one even knows where our auntie's daughter is, because as she was busy with her husband, they were in town on that day. The story that our in-law told us is that whilst they were in town, he was looking for a space to park. So he then spoke with her he then spoke with he then spoke with my auntie's daughter and told her that since it was really tight at the place where he wanted to park, he asked her to get out of the car so that she can direct him. As she was directing him, the next time when he looked through the mirror, he saw that she was no longer there. He got out of the car and he started looking around, and he saw that she was already running. And the way that she was running, she started removing her jacket as well as her shoes. Then people also started giving her space because they saw that she was running mad, and he could not catch up with her because he said that the way that she was running, it was as if there was a very powerful force that was pushing her so that she can run very fast. My brother, she ran from the city coming back to the village because there are a few people in our village that saw her in the village, because they said that it was late at night. This other guy who was coming from the shops, he then saw our auntie's daughter and recognized her. When he tried to speak with her, she tried to be violent with him. Then he ran away. So ever since she was last seen in our village, as for our relatives and my father and his relatives, they never saw her. It was only those two strangers that managed to see her. From there on, no one knows and no one has an idea where she is. People do not even know if she recovered, if she died, or if she is still just running around or walking very fast, like what people said, like what our in law told us. So, my brother, this is my own story. The things that I witnessed my parents doing, this was something that they did because they tried to protect themselves from the lightnings that were striking our neighbors' houses, as well as my father's relatives that were trying to destroy his life. He then went and he took those ritualistic items after collecting them. Then, as kids, we made a mistake. Then he had to perform a sacrifice so that we can live a better life.